The morning was thick and heavy, and sunlight slipped through the classroom window like a sharp beam that didn't match the tension about to settle over the room. The desks were neatly arranged. Students whispered among themselves. Some doodled absent-mindedly, others waited for the teacher to begin. But in the very back, sitting alone, a boy hunched over a crumpled sheet of paper, absorbed in every stroke as if that drawing were the only place in the world where he could truly breathe. He gripped the pencil tightly, as though holding onto a thin thread of hope. It wasn't just any picture. There was something deeper in it, shapes no one else would know how to read, details he crafted with precision, like a secret he had hidden inside his chest. That quiet didn't last. The door swung open. The teacher entered with quick, clipped steps and a tense expression. Nothing about her seemed soft. Not her voice, not her eyes, not the way she moved between the desks. The moment she noticed him drawing, she stopped, arms crossed, a long breath. "Who told you to do that now?" Her voice sliced through the quiet. The boy swallowed hard. He didn't speak. He only tried to shield the drawing, pulling the paper closer to his chest with a small, nervous motion. The teacher walked toward him. Each step sounded like an accusation. Before he could react, she snatched the paper from his hand. The ripping noise echoed across the room. "No one wastes time with scribbles here," she said, raising the torn pieces for everyone to see. "If you don't want to learn, at least don't distract those who do." A few students laughed, their giggles muffled behind their hands. The boy stayed frozen. It was as if his breath had been torn away along with the drawing. His eyes followed the scraps falling like dirty snow onto the cold floor. "Look at me," the teacher ordered. He lifted his head slowly. Her stare was rigid, completely devoid of understanding. "I've said it 1,000 times. You need to stop with this. These drawings, this habit. It leads nowhere. You need to be more responsible." She turned abruptly. "Copy what's on the board. Now." He tried to answer, but no sound came out. Shame and anger tangled inside him, leaving him mute. His hands trembled. He lowered his gaze and pretended to write, though the lines on the page blurred in front of him. No one knew, no one even suspected, that the torn drawing was more than a child's distraction. It was a fragment of everything he didn't know how to say. It was how he turned silence into color, fear into shapes, longing into lines. But to the teacher, it was nothing more than defiance. While she lectured at the board, a few students glanced at him with crooked smiles, whispering as if he were some kind of joke. His stomach tightened. Heat climbed up his chest, a desperate urge to disappear rising with it. A boy beside him murmured, "Well, yeah. Who told him to draw that weird stuff?" The snickers followed. The boy pushed his gaze back down, trying to breathe, trying to ignore it. But something inside him cracked. It wasn't just the paper that had been torn. It was the small piece of confidence he still carried. The class dragged on, heavy and suffocating. At the end of the period, while everyone packed their bags, he bent down to gather the remnants of his drawing. His hands still shook as he picked up each fragment carefully, as though trying to salvage what was left of a crushed dream. The teacher watched from the doorway, impatient. "Throw that out and go home. Tomorrow I expect you to act like a real student." He said nothing. He just slipped the scraps into his pocket gently, as if they were too precious to leave behind. Then he walked out, making his way down the long hallway. Each step felt heavier than the last. His eyes burned, but he fought back the tears. He refused to cry where anyone could see. The hallway seemed longer than usual, stretching like the distance between him and the rest of the world. But buried inside that moment was something different, a quiet, hard-to-name sensation, a kind of internal promise, still blurry, still forming, something he didn't fully understand, but that followed him as he descended the stairs. Maybe it was hurt, maybe it was anger, maybe it was the first whisper that the drawing, the one torn in front of everyone, still had a story left to tell. The walk home was usually short, but that day felt endless. He moved slowly, nudging pebbles with his shoes, keeping his head down so no one would notice his red eyes. The weight of the paper scraps in his pocket felt much heavier than they were, as if he were carrying proof that the world didn't believe in him. When he finally reached home, the quiet of the small apartment welcomed him with more kindness than anyone had offered all day. The door creaked softly as he entered. He slipped off his shoes and tried to make it down the hallway unnoticed. But someone heard him. A gentle voice rose from the kitchen. "You're back? How was school?" He hesitated. He wanted to say, "Fine," wanted to bury the shame, wanted to swallow the entire day. But he couldn't. He just muttered, "It was normal," and headed for his room. The one who cared for him, someone patient, someone who truly loved him, sensed immediately that something was wrong. The caregiver didn't press him right away, gave him a few seconds, took a slow breath, and walked to the bedroom. When the door swung open, he found the boy sitting on the floor. The torn pieces of the drawing spread out in front of him like he was trying to solve an impossible puzzle. What happened? This time, the boy couldn't hide it. Tears filled his eyes, and he explained in broken words, between sobs, how the teacher had torn his drawing in front of everyone and said it wasn't worth anything. The caregiver moved closer, knelt down, picked up one of the ripped pieces, and studied the lines. Even destroyed, the talent was unmistakable. It wasn't the work of a distracted child. It carried depth, emotion, and technique that no one had ever taught him. "This," he whispered, "is not trash. This is far too delicate to be dismissed." The boy wiped his face with his sleeve. "She said it's just nonsense. She said I'm lazy." The caregiver shook his head, anger flickering behind a calm voice. "People who don't understand sensitivity often confuse it with laziness. That's ignorance, not truth." The boy inhaled shakily. It still hurt, his hands still trembled, but hearing that eased a small part of the weight inside him. The caregiver stood, walked to a drawer, and pulled out a large sketchbook with a deep blue cover and thick pages. "I want to show you something." He sat down beside him and opened it. Inside were dozens of the boy's drawings, some from weeks ago, others from months earlier. He had collected every one he found, lying around the house, folded, forgotten, tucked away. He kept them there, protected. "I save them all because I know this is more than a hobby," he said, his tone firm yet warm. "This is part of who you are, and no one has the right to rip that away from you." The boy didn't speak. He was moved by the way his creations had been cared for. It was the first time anyone had truly valued them. Then the caregiver pulled out his phone, opened a web page, and showed him something new. "Look at this." He pointed to the screen. "International Youth Illustration Contest. Kids from all over the world send in their drawings. It's real, it's big, it's respected. The deadline closes in a few weeks." The boy's eyebrows tightened, startled. "No, I'm not good enough. She said that." "She said something untrue," he cut in, "and you believed it. When someone destroys what's special, you start thinking it's weakness. But this," he touched the torn drawing, "is strength." The boy bit his lip, wrestling with the memory of the classroom. "They won't laugh at me." "Maybe they will. Small-minded people do that. But you know what actually matters?" He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "How much of your truth lives in what you create, and that no one can take away." Silence filled the room. Not sadness, something new. The first spark of courage. The caregiver took a breath, opened a blank page in the sketchbook and said, "Here's what we'll do. You choose one of your drawings or make a new one. Something that speaks about you. Something no one could ever tear apart in here." He tapped the boy's chest. "And I'll help you submit it." The boy stared at the phone screen, at the contest announcement. It looked beautiful, big, too far away to reach. But at the same time, something about it pulled him in. "I can try," he murmured. "You can do more than try. You can stand out." The boy held the torn pieces a little tighter and felt something shift inside him. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was the beginning of purpose. That night, the room felt smaller, almost as if the walls had drawn closer to cradle the quiet. The boy sat on the edge of the bed, the sketchbook open on the blanket. Each page showed a different version of himself. Some lines gentle, some intense, some colorful, some dark. He brushed his fingertips over the pages carefully, afraid to damage something precious. The caregiver had left a few minutes earlier, giving him space to think, but the promise he made echoed in the boy's mind like a call, a drawing that speaks about you. He closed his eyes and remembered the classroom, the laughter, the teacher's harsh voice. For a moment, the courage he'd felt earlier flickered like a fragile flame. The image of the torn drawing consumed him again. The sting of being mocked in front of everyone still burned, but then the image of the blue sketchbook, full of his work, valued and protected, cut through the memory like a beam of light. Someone believed in him. Someone had seen worth where the school saw only trouble, and that stirred something deep inside him. He took a steady breath, opened the desk drawer, and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. It was blank, untouched, a beginning. He sat before it, pencil in hand. But fear sat beside him too. For several long minutes, the pencil didn't move. He stared at the page as if it were a mirror reflecting every doubt ever thrown at him. "You're unfocused. Your drawing makes no sense. This is a waste of time. You have no talent." He swallowed hard, shut his eyes again, and remembered the words he'd heard earlier. "This is who you are." Slowly, something warm began to rise inside him. Not anger, not sadness. It felt like a quiet strength, as if some part of him was tired of being pushed into the dark. When he opened his eyes, the pencil finally touched the page, and the first line appeared. It wasn't perfect or straight or planned. It was simply honest, and that was enough. He began to draw almost instinctively. With every stroke, his hands grew a little bolder. He created shapes that felt like pieces of memory, shadows that carried his fears, light that hinted at hope. He mixed everything together the way someone tries to rebuild a life from fragments. The drawing expanded, line after line. It didn't look like anything he had ever made before. It was deeper, more sincere. Every detail seemed to reveal something he had kept hidden for a long time. By the time dawn crept in, he was still there, eyes tired but heart unburdened. The caregiver stepped quietly into the room. "Still awake?" He nodded, eyes fixed on the paper. "Can I see?" There was a small, meaningful pause before he handed the drawing over. The caregiver lifted it closer to the light and said nothing at first. He simply looked at every line, every shadow, every piece of the boy's inner world laid onto the paper. Slowly his expression shifted, surprise, then emotion, and finally something that resembled profound admiration. "This," his voice trembled slightly, "this is extraordinary." The boy flushed. "You really think so?" "I don't think. I know." He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "This speaks. This feels. This is real art." The words fell over the boy like rain after a long drought. He inhaled deeply, trying to steady the emotion rising in him. The caregiver set the drawing on the desk and spoke with resolve. "We're sending this one. This is you telling the world who you are, and I doubt the world will ignore it." The boy looked at the drawing again. The fear was still there, of course, fear of rejection, of mockery, of being dismissed. But for the first time, hope outweighed fear. It felt like, by putting his feelings on the page, he had discovered something he'd never noticed before, his own voice. And in that moment, he made a decision. His teacher would no longer define the worth of his talent. Laughter wouldn't decide his future. Shame would no longer fill the space where courage now lived. He was going to enter the contest, not to prove anything to the teacher or his classmates, but to prove to himself that his art, his voice, deserved to exist. The next morning, he woke earlier than usual. The drawing he'd made the night before was still on the desk, dry and steady, glowing in the early light. He stared at it for a few seconds, as if to confirm he had truly created it. Then he placed it carefully inside a folder. He had made his choice. But the world, especially the school, didn't know that yet. When he reached the school gate, clusters of students were already gathered, laughing and shoving each other. He walked through them in small, cautious steps, clutching the folder with both hands like a treasure. No one knew what he carried. Maybe it was better that way. The moment he entered the classroom, His stomach tightened. The teacher was already arranging her materials on the desk. The memory of the previous day hit him like a punch. The torn paper, the laughter, the humiliation. He breathed deeply and sat down. For a few minutes, everything seemed like it would unfold normally, but life enjoys testing those who begin to bloom. While the students chatted before the first lesson, someone noticed his folder slightly open on the desk. With the usual mix of curiosity and lack of boundaries, the student asked, "What's that?" Before he could answer, another kid grabbed the folder and opened it, and then everyone saw. "It's another drawing of his!" One of them shouted, already laughing. In seconds, multiple eyes were fixed on the paper. The teacher heard the commotion and walked over. "What's going on now?" The student holding the folder lifted the drawing like it was evidence of wrongdoing. "Look, teacher, he's got another one of those things." Her expression shifted immediately. Impatience mingled with disdain. "This again?" she said, taking the drawing from his hands. "Wasn't yesterday enough for you?" The boy stood up quickly, not out of courage, but instinct. I need that drawing." "For what?" she replied sharply. "Going to waste more time on fantasies?" He drew a shaky breath, trying to keep his voice steady. I'm entering a contest." The room froze for a second, then the laughter erupted. Some students slapped their desks. Others repeated his words in a mocking tone. "A contest. The little artist thinks he's competing." The teacher shook her head and placed the drawing on her desk, as if handling something useless. "My dear," she said in a tone meant to sound gentle but dripping with contempt, "international contests are for people with training, skill, study, not for someone who scribbled on a sheet last night." His throat tightened. "But I want to try." She laughed. Actually laughed. "Try? You struggle to keep up with the basics. Imagine competing with young artists from around the world. Let's put this nonsense aside and focus on what matters, your subjects. Dreaming is fine, but only when it makes sense." The boy felt his face burn. He lowered his head as a few classmates mimicked his voice, repeating, "I want to try," between bursts of laughter. He reached out to take the drawing back. The teacher let him, but not without one last jab. "Do whatever you want at home, but in here you follow the rules. No drawings during class, and stop living outside of reality." Each word felt like another weight placed on his shoulders. He returned to his seat slowly, pressing the folder against his chest. Several students were still whispering and snickering. He thought about giving up. For a few minutes the idea seemed logical, reasonable, simple. If he quit, the pain would stop. Nobody would laugh. Nobody would humiliate him. He would just become another quiet kid in the room. But then he remembered the caregiver's face, the proud eyes, the steady voice, the way he held the drawing with both hands and called it extraordinary. Someone believed in him, and sometimes one person is enough. During recess, he kept away from the others and sat by the fence near the court, hugging his knees. Sunlight warmed his skin, easing the cold knot inside him. He stayed there, breathing slowly. The wind seemed to whisper things he always forgot to hear. He opened the folder and looked at the drawing again. It was beautiful, honest, real, and he knew, deeply knew, that the teacher hadn't understood anything about what lived in that picture. And in that quiet corner of the schoolyard, something settled firmly inside him. He wasn't giving up. Not this time, not on what belonged to him. The afternoon arrived wrapped in a golden light that slid through the bedroom window, brightening the room, as if announcing a new beginning. The boy placed the folder on the desk with care, as though the drawing inside were too fragile for the harshness of the world. He took a deep breath. He needed to finish the contest submission and send it out. It was now or never. The caregiver entered the room with a glass of water and a soft smile. "Ready to show the world what you've got?" The boy nodded, not with full confidence, but with the timid bravery of someone who had decided to face fear, even if his legs were shaking. He sat at the desk, opened the folder, and placed the drawing under the light. Even he, who had watched it come to life line by line, was surprised by what he had created. It was a blend of pain and hope, bold shadows and bits of light, like his soul had been squeezed onto the page in a way that was raw, but somehow poetic. "Let's take the photos," the caregiver said, picking up the phone. The boy watched every movement, almost in disbelief. He was actually sending his drawing to an international competition. He, the boy who almost quit, the one people called lazy, the one whose artwork had been torn apart for everyone to see. Strange. And at the same time, right. The first photo came out good, but the second captured something special, the soft gleam that appeared when light touched the pencil details. The caregiver smiled. "Perfect. Now let's fill out the information." The contest website asked for name, age, country, and then a large box with the question, "What does your artwork mean to you?" The boy froze in front of the keyboard. The question felt enormous. The caregiver noticed his hesitation. "Do you want me to write it for you?" He shook his head. "No, I want to use my own words." And he began. He typed slowly, weighing every sentence. He wrote about fear, about silence, about how drawing was the only way he knew to express feelings he couldn't say out loud. He wrote about finding beauty where no one else bothered to look. And he ended with a simple, powerful line, "I draw because it's when I feel alive." The caregiver read the paragraph and swallowed hard. "This is strong." "It's true," the boy said. With everything filled out, the final step appeared. Submit. His hands trembled. It was more than sending a drawing. It was opening his inner world to strangers. It was letting himself be seen, truly seen. "You want to press it?" the caregiver asked. He took a breath, placed his finger on the screen, and tapped, submitted. For a moment, the room fell silent. Then relief washed over them, a quiet kind of pride. Something inside him felt like it had grown a little taller. Over the next days, patience became his biggest enemy. School stayed the same, classmates whispering, the teacher indifferent, mocking comments whenever he picked up a pencil. But something had changed. A quiet strength, a secret hope he carried in his chest. He was waiting for something big, and that expectation kept him steady. At night, he returned to his room and drew again. Not because he had to, but because he now understood that drawing was his way of existing. He sketched new ideas, tested colors, shadows, bolder strokes. It was as if, during that week, parts of himself he had never met were finally coming out. Almost a week later, while he was sketching quietly, the phone buzzed. The caregiver was in the living room. "A message came in. It's from the contest." The boy's heart jumped. Not with joy, but with fear. He ran to the living room and saw the caregiver holding the phone, staring at him with an expression that was part surprise, part something the boy couldn't quite read. What did they say?" The caregiver slowly turned the screen toward him. It was a formal message, but it carried a certain tone. "Your work caught our attention. We need a few additional details." The boy felt his legs weaken. Is that good?" he asked, barely breathing. "That's excellent. They only ask for extra information when they really like the artwork." He covered his mouth with both hands, heart pounding wildly. His drawing had been noticed by professionals, noticed by artists, noticed by people who valued what the teacher had called trash. That message wasn't just a request for paperwork. It was the first solid proof that the talent he had hidden in silence had finally been seen. And his life was about to change. The contest message stayed on the screen for a few seconds that felt like hours. The boy stared at it wide-eyed, afraid that blinking might make it disappear. The caregiver smiled. Not a loud, exaggerated smile, but the quiet kind that comes from genuine pride. "They liked you," he said, voice thick with contained excitement. "They really liked you." The boy swallowed hard, feeling his heartbeat race. "What do they need?" The caregiver scrolled through the message slowly. "They want identity confirmation, a brief technical description of the piece, and a signed permission form. That's normal. They only ask for that when the artwork goes to the second stage." Second stage. The words boomed inside him like thunder. So it wasn't a generic reply. It wasn't a thank you for participating. It was real. The caregiver reached for a pen and some papers, but the boy stood frozen, gripping the back of the sofa so hard his knuckles turned white, as if he needed support to stay upright. "Hey," the caregiver said softly as he approached. "You okay?" The boy took a long breath, trying to gather the avalanche of feelings inside him. I can't believe this is happening." "It's only the beginning," the caregiver replied, squeezing his shoulder. But as in every story where someone begins to grow, the world rarely makes things easy. The next day at school, everything looked the same. Noisy classroom, scattered desks, the teacher with her rigid, impatient expression. The boy walked in, trying and failing to hide the small smile he had carried since the night before. But joy, even the quiet kind, attracts attention. Before the first class even started, one of the boys who loved to mock him came over. "What are you hiding there?" he asked with a crooked grin. "Why are you all happy?" The boy tried to ignore him, but the teacher overheard and, of course, decided to interfere. "Is there a problem?" she asked, staring directly at him, already waiting for an excuse to pick at him again. He breathed in slowly. No problem." But his voice came out different, firmer, steadier, and that only drew more eyes. "If you're wrapped up in that contest nonsense again, let me warn you now. That only gets in the way of your studies," the teacher said, adjusting her glasses like someone performing a duty. He bit his lip. The urge to answer back burned, but he swallowed it. Not worth it. Not now. Not when something so important was happening outside those walls. But she wasn't done. "I'm going to speak with the administration. I won't let you waste time with illusions." His heart froze. If the school created any kind of bureaucratic blockage, it could delay the contest response, and the deadline was tight. The message had been clear. Reply within 48 hours. He glanced at the classroom clock. Time seemed to run faster than his courage. During recess, he rushed to the courtyard and grabbed the caregiver's phone, the one he had been allowed to keep for checking emails. He opened his inbox and saw another message from the contest, repeating the short deadline. His breathing quickened. The caregiver had promised to come by in the afternoon to help with the documents. But what if the teacher tried to stop something? What if the principal didn't like the idea? What if it caused delays? He paced in circles across the courtyard, trying to breathe through the anxiety. He knew he had to act quickly. He knew he couldn't let anyone block his path now. When the bell rang and he went back to class, the teacher was already standing at the door, waiting. "We need to talk after class," she announced, voice dripping with authority. His stomach twisted. He knew that wouldn't mean anything good. Hours later, when class ended, she called him aside. "So," she began, arms crossed, "I've learned you're really involved in this contest situation, and I cannot let that interfere with your performance in my class." He clenched his fists. "This won't interfere with anything," he answered, more firmly than he intended. She narrowed her eyes. "So now you're being insolent. You think you know more than I do?" His silence was treated as rebellion. "The school will not take responsibility for these fantasies," she continued, "and to avoid distractions, I want you to leave all your drawing materials at home until the end of the term." It hit him like a punch to the chest. No drawings, no materials, no space to create. It would be suffocating. But at that exact moment, the classroom door swung open. It was the caregiver. "I'll take responsibility," he said, stepping into the room with firm, deliberate strides. "And no, he's not leaving anything at home. He's taking part in a serious competition, one that recognizes a talent you failed to see." The teacher froze, stunned. But this isn't appropriate." "What's not appropriate," the caregiver cut in, "is trying to stop a student from developing the very thing that makes him unique." The boy felt his throat tighten with emotion. The caregiver handed over the signed document. "We're here to deliver the required forms, and he needs to respond to the contest request immediately." For the first time that day, the boy allowed himself a smile. There were obstacles. There was pressure. There were people rooting against him, but there was something much larger on his side. Someone who believed in him, and his own talent, the one no one could erase. The walk home that afternoon felt different. The boy walked beside the caregiver, gripping the folder so tightly that his fingers ached, but for the first time since everything began, he wasn't afraid. He felt urgency. He felt hope. The moment they arrived, they went straight to the table. The caregiver opened the laptop, connected to the internet, and checked the contest inbox. A new message was waiting. Longer, more formal. The boy's heart sped up. "Let's read it together," the caregiver said. The message said, "Your work has advanced to the final evaluation stage. We require a brief online interview with the artist to confirm authorship, artistic intent, and technical details. The interview will take place tomorrow at 3 p.m. local time." The boy covered his mouth. An interview. Finalists. The caregiver took a breath, clearly moved. "You made it. You're among the best." The boy couldn't answer. His chest felt like it might burst, but with pride this time. The next day, he woke far too early. He hadn't slept properly. His mind spun with questions. What if I freeze? What if they think my voice sounds weird? What if they ask something I can't answer? What if I disappoint everyone? But when his eyes landed on the drawing sitting on the desk, something inside him softened. That was his truth. No one could take that from him. At 2:40 p.m., the caregiver opened the laptop and adjusted the camera. "There we go. Just speak from your heart." They're not looking for perfection. They want sincerity. At exactly 3:00 p.m., the call connected. 3 evaluators appeared on the screen. A woman with short hair, a man with thick glasses, and another with a serene expression, who was likely the artistic director. All of them looked professional, elegant, serious. Then came the first sentence. "Hello, it's a pleasure to speak with you. We received your artwork, and we must say, it moved us deeply." The boy blinked, trying to absorb the words. "Thank you," he said, voice quiet but steady. They began asking questions: how he developed the drawing, what certain elements meant, why he chose specific shadows, what he felt while creating it, and each answer he gave seemed to make the judges lean in more, listen more closely, fall into a deeper silence at the end of each explanation. The woman said, "It's rare to find this much expressiveness in someone your age." The man with glasses added, "You already have your own artistic language. That can't be taught. It reveals itself." And the artistic director concluded, "Your piece isn't just beautiful, it's necessary." The boy felt tears sting his eyes. Never, never had he heard anything like that. At school, they called him unfocused. Here they called him necessary. At the end of the interview, the director said, "The final results will be announced tomorrow, but no matter what happens, know this: you are a real artist. Keep going. Don't stop." The call ended. The boy stared at the blank screen for a few seconds, trying to believe what he had just lived. The next morning crawled by, painfully slow. He could barely eat. The caregiver tried to distract him, but the boy's mind was locked on the result. By 10 a.m., the whole school somehow knew he had entered a contest, not out of support, but because rumors had spread. The teacher pretended she didn't care, but she kept watching him out of the corner of her eye. He sat at his desk, staring at the clock, when the phone vibrated inside his backpack. It was from the contest. His heart stopped. He rushed into an empty hallway and answered with a trembling hand. Hello? This is the International Committee. We're calling to officially announce the winners." He held his breath. The voice continued. "We wanted to tell you personally that you are the grand winner of this year's youth category." The hallway fell silent. The world seemed to freeze. "Winner?" he stammered. "Yes. Your artwork received the highest score among hundreds of young participants from many different countries. Your piece will be officially exhibited in our international gallery and featured on our global platforms. Congratulations." The boy covered his face in disbelief. Tears burst out like a flood breaking through a dam. He couldn't speak for several seconds. "Thank you," he finally managed, voice shaking. "Thank you so much." When he returned to the classroom, his eyes were red, but his smile was bright. The teacher frowned. "What happened?" "Why are you crying?" He sat down, took a steady breath, and answered with a calmness that surprised even him. "They called me. I won the contest." The classroom went silent, silent in a way it had never been before. No one laughed, no one whispered, no one mocked him. The teacher's face drained of color, as if the floor had vanished beneath her feet. For the first time, the boy sat with the posture of someone who knew exactly what he was worth. And in that instant, the kid who used to be the punchline became someone people had to respect. The silence that settled after those words was impossible to describe. It felt thicker somehow, heavier, filled with something no one there knew how to handle: the truth. The boy, the same one who had been a target for jokes, for snickers, for cruel comments, now sat in the same desk as always, but with a different kind of light in his eyes. A light no one could put out. The teacher stood frozen for a few seconds. The shock twisted her usually rigid expression into something between disbelief and discomfort. It was clear she had no idea how to react. How do you look at someone you tried to crush? Someone who now shone brighter than everyone in the room. She cleared her throat, trying to regain control, to pretend she was unfazed. "Well, congratulations," she muttered, her voice so low it nearly blended with the scraping chairs. "That's good for you." But the boy didn't answer, not out of disrespect, but because he had just discovered something important. This was how the world behaved when truth finally surfaced, when talent spoke louder than any unfair criticism. In the back of the classroom, a few students who used to laugh at him now stared in surprise, some even in shame. One of them attempted a weak smile. Yeah, that's cool, I guess." The boy gave a polite nod. He already understood. Real recognition never comes from those who mocked you. It comes from the fact that you never gave up. During recess, as he walked through the courtyard, some kids came up to him, but not to make fun of him this time. They approached with a shy, genuine curiosity. "Are you going to travel to another country? Will your drawing be online? How did you think of those shadows? Can you teach us how to draw?" He wasn't used to positive attention. He froze for a moment, unsure of what to say. Then he smiled, a small but sincere. I can try to teach, yes." It was the first time he ever said that without fear. When he got home, he opened the door and saw the caregiver standing in the middle of the living room, phone in hand, waiting anxiously. "So," he asked, stumbling over his words, "was it the contest?" The boy didn't answer with long sentences. He just ran forward, threw his arms around the caregiver, and cried on his shoulder. He cried everything at once: relief, joy, fear, pride. He cried like someone who finally understood that not giving up had been worth it. The caregiver held him tightly. "You deserve it, every single bit of it." When the boy pulled back, the caregiver cupped his face with both hands. "Remember what I told you, that what you create is who you are. Well, the world saw you, really saw you." The boy smiled through hiccups. They said I'm an artist." "You've always been one," the caregiver replied. "They just confirmed it." A few days later, the school received an official statement from the contest organization, announcing that the student had won and would represent the country in an international exhibition. The school administration put a poster on the main bulletin board, and there was his name, printed big and bold. Students passing by stared with admiration, with surprise, even with pride. The teacher, when she saw the poster, swallowed hard. She tried to use phrases like, "Well, yes, I always encouraged. He always had potential." But no one believed her. The truth was already out there, as visible as the drawing that was now traveling the world. At the end of the week, the boy received a video call from the international team. They showed him the gallery where his artwork would be displayed. White walls, focused lights, other young artists from around the globe, creating a scene that once felt impossibly distant. But it wasn't distant anymore. It belonged to him now. "This space here," the artistic director said, pointing to a central wall, "will be for your work." The boy felt his heart flutter. His drawing would be right there, where people from all over the world would stop and look. There, where no one would tear it, mock it, or dismiss it. It was the ultimate proof that his inner world had worth, and that no cruel comment could ever erase that. On the last day of that week, he walked home slowly, observing the street as if seeing it for the first time. The wind brushed his face, carrying that good feeling of looking toward the future without fear. When he stepped inside, he saw the blue sketchbook on the table, the one where the caregiver kept his old drawings. He sat down, flipped through page after page, and noticed how much he had grown. He grabbed a fresh sheet of paper, took a deep breath, and started a new drawing, not to compete, not to prove anything, but because now he understood. Drawing wasn't an escape. It was identity, and no one would ever take that from him again. Some stories start small, almost invisible. Stories born quietly in the details, like a trembling pencil in a child's hand, or a drawing torn in silence at the back of a classroom. But some of these stories, they grow. They break through walls. They rise above the scorn, the humiliation, the laughter, the dismissiveness. And even wounded, they keep breathing. They keep pushing forward. This boy's story is one of those. He could have given up the moment his drawing was torn. He could have believed he had no talent. He could have accepted the label they slapped on him, the same label so many others end up carrying for the rest of their lives. But something inside him burned quietly, a stubborn, silent strength that not even the cruelty of an entire classroom managed to extinguish. And when life opened the smallest crack for him, he chose to step through it. That's how it works for those who keep going even when everything screams the opposite. Victory never comes fast, never comes easy. But when it arrives, it changes everything around you. The teacher who humiliated him was forced to face what she ignored. The classmates who laughed had to look at him with respect. And the caregiver who believed in him when no one else did received living proof that one word of support can change an entire destiny. And the boy, he learned something most people never learn. Talent may be quiet, but its truth can't be silenced. His drawing now travels the world. His name is displayed in an international gallery, and the child who once lowered his head to hide his tears now lifts his face like someone who finally knows exactly who he is. Because once you find your voice, no one can shut it down. And now let me ask you something. Straight to you, sitting right there. How many times has someone torn apart something that mattered to you? I'm not talking about paper. I'm talking about dreams, about hopes, about projects you held carefully, that someone crushed with a few careless words. How many times have you heard, "That's not for you"? How many times has someone tried to shrink what you feel inside? Here's the truth. There will always be someone trying to dim your light, but there will also be a moment, one single moment, when you decide not to let them. And when that choice happens, life turns. So if this story stirred something in you, if it touched your heart in any way, if it reminded you of something you abandoned halfway, write in the comments what this story made you feel. Your comment helps the channel, but more than that, it helps you let out what you've been carrying inside. And of course, if you like stories like this, subscribe to the channel. Every video here is made to move you, inspire you, remind you of your own worth. And leave a like to help this story reach even farther, because trust me, someone out there needs to hear this today. If you want to support even more, share this video with someone who needs to believe again in what they carry in their heart. Sometimes one single gesture changes everything, and you just saw that happen right here. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for feeling this story along with me. And remember, when the world tries to make you give up, that's exactly when you have to continue. See you in the next video.